very happy to be here as we collaborate quite a bit. Of course, the payments domain is one of the big sectors in fintech where a lot is always going on one hand due to technology, but also due to, of course, a lot of regulations. And we'll be talking a bit about that because I think that's also one of the specialities of the Dutch Payment Association, to keep track of things that are going on a European level and Dutch level with regard to payments, and to actually keep the market up to pace and facilitate the whole payments infrastructure. Here you can see the agenda. For actually those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Don Ginsel. I am the CEO of Holland Fintech, and I'll be guiding you through the process this afternoon. We still get some people in, but we're very slowly going to let them in, and so we're going to quietly start so they don't miss too much. What we're going to do is I'm going to give the word to Gijs Boudewijn, the director, the managing director, is that the right word, Gijs? Yeah, okay. It's for the Dutch Payment Association. He will be telling us a bit about what they're up to, and we'll be talking a bit about what the future of the payment landscape will look like. Then I'll tell you a bit about Holland Fintech, and especially look back at what happened in the past month in the fintech scene. We do that every meetup. We actually do a bit of a brief recap on some of the highlights of the news to just give you a bit of a feeling of the bigger trends and developments. Then we're going to get a presentation from Airwallex. Christo will be doing that. That's really nice. Then we have an interactive Kahoot quiz. I hope you all bring out your phones and join us for a bit of fun in talking and working with the knowledge about fintech. Then we got Paul Chandler here from Compass Plus Technologies giving us a presentation, and then we'll close it all off. We had a third presentation who unfortunately, due to family circumstances, couldn't make it today. So we have a bit of a shortened program. But I'm very happy with the speakers that we have, so I think we're going to have a very insightful session. But then again, it means we're a bit spacious in our program compared to other times where we might be a bit tight. So I think I'm definitely counting on you for a lot of questions and discussion about everything that's going on. To get things started, Gijs, could you come forward and tell us a bit about... Yeah, we'd love to hear a bit from you about the Dutch Payment Association.
All right, thank you, Don. It is great to have so many of you guys here, some familiar faces, some new faces. I think it's one of the first, maybe the first one, the back to school meetup, the first one physically?
The first one here together with you, yes.
Yeah.
And so after the summer, indeed, it's the first one again.
Yeah, so good to meet in person. Some of you may know what the Dutch Payments Association is, others may not know. It's always quite difficult to explain, and probably we will come back to that a little bit when you're going to ask me something about Ideal, which we'll come back to later on. But basically our high-level mission is to facilitate secure, reliable, efficient and accessible payments in the Netherlands, which is pretty ambitious, isn't it? So, because basically we don't do anything, we do that of course together with our members. Our members are basically the credit institutions. We were spun out of the Dutch Bankers Association in 2011 because of the first Payment Services Directive, and the traditional banks are of course very afraid of the newcomers, the fintechies, the payment institutions that are supposed to come in and have their lunch. Well, that's a lot of history and that's a bit nuanced right now, but anyway, that was one of the main reasons to spin out payments-related and payments-fraud-related activities, cybersecurity-related activities out of the Bankers Association. Have a separate association which is open to not only the credit institutions, the incumbent banks, but also to payment institutions and e-money institutions. The latter is not a very big thing in the Netherlands as opposed to the UK, but that's explainable. So basically we represent all licensed institutions that operate on the supply side of the payments industry in the Netherlands. That's the last bullet. One of the things, so I'll start at the bottom, we do a lot with the stakeholders, i.e. the end users, whereas typically we say the Dutch Bankers Association is the lobby club of the incumbent banks. We are a sort of neutral institution representing both the same banks, but also the PIs and the EMIs, with a keen eye for the interests of the stakeholders, the end users, especially consumers, but also corporates. And that is why in our board there's an independent, the chair, which currently is a guy called Godfried Leijwald, who used to be the CEO of SWIFT, formerly, before that, McKinsey. Some of you may know him, and one board member representing the consumer side, and one independent representing or nominated, it's not represented, but nominated by the retailers, and then of course the banks and the PIs themselves. So in our governance, and we have a stakeholder forum, which also has a formal role in our bylaw. So it's not the same as sometimes difficult to explain. We look a lot like, but we are not a trade association. So what do? We do a lot of stuff in what we call the collective space, because of course our members, they are competitors out there in the payments market, but I don't have to tell most of you that there is a need to collaborate, to make stuff work, to move money from A to B. You need standards, everybody needs access, you need infrastructures. There are big change projects like instant payments. And we have Frans here, one of our team leaders who co-managed the instant payments project, may come back to that later. That's stuff we do, and we manage what we call the collective product characteristics. What products? I mean, we don't have Dutch products anymore. We abolished our debit card scheme, we abolished chipknip, we abolished Accept Giro. Some of you may not even know what Accept Giro was. It's paper. But also those European products, mostly managed and owned by the European Payments Council, still need a local flavor or local representation, and we do a lot of work for the European Payments Council, managing the local end, the local leg, if you will, of these collective products. Because even our own members, so, well, if we abolish our local scheme, all the work will be done by Brussels, but that's not true, because there's no one in Brussels doing our work. Basically, we are doing the work in Brussels, together with the guys from all the other countries, guys and girls from all the other countries. So it's ambitious and sometimes also a bit unthankful. Same France I just mentioned. We because of the many changes within the board of our bank board members, some of them are not payment nerds and they don't realize what it takes, all these things, to make stuff work. Because we only report to our board about the special projects which have out-of-pocket costs. And then last year I said to Frans, we have so many new board members who don't know that about 50% of the work we do, they never see that because we don't report about it, but still needs to be done. And then Frans said on the offside of our board, just to illustrate, a long presentation with about 50 or 60 slides. And he said, oh, you're doing that too? Yes, we do that too, but we don't bother you. But people deep down in your organization will know why we need to do that. That's why we are payment nerds. I said a few words about a lot of representation in a certain sense, because if there are conflicting interests between, let's say, the payment institutions and the credit institution as our constituency, we say, okay, then the banks should do their own lobbying through the Bankers Association, and the payment institutions should do their own lobbying through the VBIN. But so far that has never occurred yet. So we still manage it. So we sit on what is called maatschappelijk overleg betalingsverkeer, or the National Forum on the Payment System, presided by the Dutch Central Bank, multi-stakeholder forum. We represent, funnily enough, because the Dutch Bankers Association has no payments-related activities anymore, so we sit in the Payments Committee and stuff at the European Banking Federation, but we're not a member of it, but it's a Dutch specialty. We are proud to be a member of the European Payments Council. We do a lot of work there. Frans can come back to that as well. There's a sort of funny little association, the European Card Payments Association, which is an association of the remaining domestic card schemes, like Pago, Bancomat, Carte Bancaire, Girocard in Germany. And funnily enough, even if we don't have our own Dutch domestic card scheme anymore, I'm vice chair of the board of the ECPA, just for the fun of it, as I always say. And of course we do a lot of activities in standardization. We have the committee TC, Technical Committee 68, which is about banking and banking stuff. And we have the NEN, the Nederlands Normalisatie Instituut. And this is basically the real deep down standardization works, but basically nobody should bother about, but it's still very much necessary. You know, Gerard Hartschink, perhaps the name, these type of guys, that's very long-term, global. ISO is global, so that's people think, by the way, that the standards, the international standards arena, it's sort of value-free. It's all just techie guys thinking in bits and bytes, but there's nothing more political than the ISO world, because if you control the standards, you control a lot more. And the Chinese have huge resources onto influencing the international standards. So don't think it's trivial. It's pretty important. Well, we didn't discuss what I would do, but I thought it would be good just to. What is a couple of things that are keeping us busy right now? Just to name a few, of course, one of is the instant payments regulation. You probably all heard about. Maybe not so eventful for the Netherlands, because we sort of already have instant payments as the new normal, and we have an IBAN name check, confirmation of payee, and we can elaborate on that a little bit with Frans, because he does a lot of stuff on that one in Brussels. Yep. So instant will become the new normal. It has become a geopolitical thing, because the European Commission and the European Central Bank believe that instant payments will be the new infrastructure to provide us with a truly European payment solution next to the American card-based solutions. And that is because, and this has to do with the geopolitical situation, we need to have some what they call open strategic autonomy. We don't want an idiot either in Washington, Moscow or Beijing being able to push the button and the lights go out in Europe. That's basically the way I try to explain why it's from geopolitical importance. Then a funny thing is we have an upcoming legislative proposal in the Netherlands on making cash provisioning mandatory. We have a covenant which was enacted April last year, which is a voluntary agreement between the banks, the retailers, consumers, the elderly, and so on. But the Ministry of Finance has decided that they don't think that self-regulation is future-proof. So they have announced this summer, just before summer, they wrote, at least Minister Kaag wrote a letter to Parliament telling Parliament about their intentions to enact legislation, which will be published and consulted later this year. And basically that will mandate the 3 large banks to keep up Geldmaat, which is the cash infrastructure, and 8 banks providing 89.6% of all payment accounts in the Netherlands to provide not only cash withdrawal functions but also cash deposit functions. And that is a sensitive point. For instance, Bank doesn't like that because they don't have cash deposit service, but will have that obligation if the ministry
is it likely that Geldmaat will also play a role in that? That it will be a shared infrastructure that will do it?
It's already a shared infrastructure, owned by 3 banks.
No, exactly. But as Geldmaat, you can withdraw your bank money also at Geldmaat. Yeah. Will that also be likely that you will be able to deposit your money through Geldmaat?
Of course. But then Bank says, but then I will be at the mercy of the 3 large banks who are the shareholders of Geldmaat. So that's a sensitive thing. Anything could happen there. But the obligation to maintain the cash provisioning is not an obligation for Geldmaat, it's an obligation of the banks. Yeah. That they can do that through Geldmaat, that's up to them. Now I'm not fully up to them, but I mean that's the logical way to do it, because that we come from individual, the joint venture, and because they had cash centers of themselves, those were pooled, and the ATM network was pooled. We're not sure where that will happen, but that's a typical Dutch thing. But it has a relationship with the digital euro legislation enacted, proposed by the Commission, to name another one, because if you say the digital euro needs to be legal tender and mandatory acceptance and free provisioning, blah blah, you have to bring, and that was not the case funnily enough, the good old banknotes from a legal perspective, you have to bring them at par with the digital equivalent. You can't have a mandatory acceptance of the digital euro and non-mandatory, because that's the Dutch tradition, non-mandatory for the banknotes. So that's also moving in that direction, whereas we, here in the Netherlands, together with the retailers, we say, we want to drive out cash because the cost to society is huge, as you know, and most of us know. But from a financial inclusion, accessibility perspective, whoa, wait a minute, we still need it. Even with the digital euro, we still need banknotes. So how do we make sure that those who really need it, and that's another definition, of course, I won't go into that, but those that it still will be there in future for those who are dependent on cash, however defined that dependency. That's another thing. So going back to the digital, well, I said the digital euro, of course, the whole sense or nonsense of the thing in the first place, especially in the Dutch context, is not that obvious, to say the least, because what is the problem we are solving with a digital euro other than geopolitical or financial stability or whatever other motives? But from a retail payments perspective, it's pretty hard to see, and that's our perspective. We say it's the easy one. The Bankers Association, they can worry about funding and financial stability and blah, blah, blah. We're just simple payment nerds. So if we look through the lens of retail payments, and I say, okay, so then I have two wallets perhaps in my, one with my commercial bank money and one with digital euros. What the fuck? I mean, they can do the same at Albert Heijn, right? So what's the point? I mean, that's a way of looking at it. That's what we like to do.
That's definitely something that you hear a lot, where I think there's a lot of questions going around on what does it actually mean, or is this actually the right way to solve that problem?
Yes. Yeah, the funny thing though is that I even had a discussion today that the further down south in Europe you go and the more dependent the payment system is still on cash and on card-based payments in the internet and e-commerce environment, even banks believe that the digital euro could play a role there. And we have been telling them for more than 10 years, 15 years, well, why don't you take Ideal if you hate credit card payments in e-commerce? You don't need a central bank digital currency to solve that issue, if that is your problem. We have solved it, so last word hasn't been said about it. The Governing Council of the European Central Bank will take a decision on a next stage. But one thing is for sure, we won't see any digital euros in the wild before, let's say, 2028, 2029, if at all, because anything is still possible.
Now, I looked at the response from Parliament. It was relatively opposed to the proposal as it was, I think. So I think that everything is going to be shelved for a while.
That could be. Well, Mr. Panetta is now the Minister of Finance in Italy, so well, you never know.
You never know. Yeah.
That's of course what we would say. Well, we've investigated everything. If we wanted, we could do it, but there's no need to. So let's shelve it for another day when the need would come. But we are in the minority in Europe because there's, as I said, there's probably too many other countries that do think we would need, also because of Facebook and the Chinese and the Nigerians have it. And who's going to pay for it? I mean, it's going to be a huge operation. Oh, we'll just use the existing
But the interesting part, I think some of the projects that you have here on the list, like instant payments, digital euro, think about also, and this is not of course legislative, but think about EPI, right, in the later light of currents. They're all aiming to a certain extent for this independent infrastructure in Europe to be able to facilitate payments without external interference. Yeah. Right? But they're very funny that they're all on a separate track.
That's exactly what we said. Well, it was the 20th anniversary the year before that already, at the European Payments Council, where Commissioner McGuinness and Mr. Panetta were singing the songs, and we said, but guys, what is the plan? You can't expect the private sector to, and at the same time, invest in the digital euro and the European Payments Initiative and the SPA initiative and possibly others, which all fundamentally want to have something European from a geopolitical context. We're all trying to do the same thing, and that means that you run the risk that all three or all four end up in a sort of stuck in the middle scenario, because you don't know who's doing what. And in the old days, before the European Payments Council, there was a sort of clear division. So around the millennium change, there was a clear thing, okay, we need better payments in Europe, so it was a clear agreement between the European Commission, the European Central Bank and the banking industry. Okay, we now understand the message. As banking, so what we can do, we can make standards to make payments in the SEPA payments. That was the, SEPA will do the standards as industry. if you, European Commission, will provide us with a legal framework, especially for the SEPA direct debit, which is a complicated thing, which became the first payments service directive, and you guys from the European Central Bank, you have to have the real-time settlement system, which became target 2. That was it. You do this, we do that, and you do that. But this clear division of labor is not there. It's maybe a bit philosophical way of looking at it. And banks typically don't bet on one horse; they bet on all 3 horses, or 2, and one may be mandatory, others may not. I mean, it's very confusing, and that's we at least do know here, because of course we are friends with these American schemes too. They are having a good laugh about, as usual, about how the Europeans are messing up, as usual, because they don't get their act together. Any Americans in the room here? I'm insulting them.
Yes, there's a few. Yeah.
No, but I mean, and I mean geopolitically independent from the US in the current situation. Okay,
It's going to take a while.
good thing. Yeah, but anyway. So it's a good
Probably
thing.
during the next Trump administration.
Okay, so then some more stuff, digital euro. Then, of course, PSD2 review has led to the proposal of the Commission to have a very small PSD3, which basically only provides the licensing part of the old PSD2. And one of the lessons learned from PSD2 and the implementation, because it's a directive, level 1, level 2 was the SEPA, which has to be implemented in local law, and then the level 2 legislation, i.e. the European Banking Authority regulatory technical standards, which were not regulatory and not standards, just creating more confusion, but at a lower level. So we needed opinions and Q&As. So the Commission decided to put everything that was, or is, or could be open for national interpretation and implementation differences to not make that mistake again and put it all in a regulation which will have direct applicability in all member states. So there's no room for implementation delays. So we need that's a very good thing. We also think, because we lost a lot of time and money and time basically on fighting, unnecessary fighting, unconstructive fighting. So this is a wise thing, I believe, followed of course by the open finance framework. That's some open banking beyond payments, mortgage, pensions, insurance and stuff. Personally, I co-chair the multi-stakeholder group on the SEPA Payment Account Access Scheme, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative building a scheme on top of what we call the PSD2 compliance APIs to make better APIs with premium functionality at a price with a business model inside of it. The rule book has been published and we're just trying to figure out the correct internal fees, because there will be a small fee which will go from the in the old word from the issuer to the acquirer. In the old context for corner model, we call it asset brokers and asset holders. It's a holistic model which can also be reused in the open finance context. Could be any type of asset, data asset or transaction asset. That's why we have this neutral terminology, also together with the Commission, because in the open finance framework proposal you will see that the exchange of finance data beyond payments can only take place within mandatory schemes, which the industry needs to make, to the example of the SPA scheme. And if the industry doesn't succeed in that, the Commission will do the work for us. How they would do that is another matter, but that's a clear threat, so they count on the industry. And one of the things why they do this is related to the regulation thing I mentioned, because all the stuff we are now tackling as industry together, the supply and demand side, the TPPs and ESPs, is basically the stuff that the European Banking Authority was covering in the regulatory technical standards. There won't be any RTSs anymore, because that will only lead to more fighting, and they have now decided very cleverly let the market sort that out themselves by way of schemes. And then another thing, and then I'll stop, is the European Accessibility Act. Maybe they look like a bit of a strange animal, has nothing to do with access to payment systems. Payment institutions will get access to clearing and settlement in the context of PSD3/PSR. Long-standing wish from the payment institution not to be dependent on incumbent banks to have access to clearing and settlement. There will be direct access there. This is about the usability of people with dysfunctions, etc. And it's not bank specific, it's not payment specific, applies to all sectors
Digital
of economic life.
platforms, or-
Right?
yeah, exactly.
Anything.
Just, yeah.
I mean, it just makes that anyone offering services and products, whatever, they need to comply with the European Accessibility Act. And we just, again, just with the digital euro, just look from the payments lens, what does that mean for the payments ecosystem? And some of them say, yeah, but it's broader than payments, so why do you that? So we only look at payments because nobody else.
Yeah.
But indeed, it's broader. It's also how high can this thing be for people with wheelchairs and
Yeah,
stuff.
this is a problem already, right?
It's a problem here.
We can't have any wheelchair speakers here,
No,
so that's...
No, but I mean, it's a basic as that, but also in the digital environment, mobile apps, etc. and stuff is, of course, that's why, and you will, of course, be invited. Our annual conference will be innovation in the context of accessibility. So we try to, what can you do with AI to make digital products more accessible from...
Yeah, but it's already a strong team for you over the past years.
It was already, but one step beyond. So that was just to name a few.
Could you say something about ideal transaction and current, basically, because I think there was a very strong relationship between you and currents?
Well, officially I can't, because officially I only know what's in, I read in the newspapers. So we were already, so we used to be one organization. We had two legal entities. It was Currents Holding, was the ski money company owning Ideal, and the Payments Association with one CEO, my predecessor, Piet Monaco. He was the general manager of Currents and the general manager of the Payments Association. And we had one personnel BV with 35 people who on a time-writing basis we charged either Currents or the Payments Association for the cost. And they had the legal entity, of course, the Currents had a board of directors, we had our own board, so from a governance perspective it was totally split, but we always said it splits only after it has passed each brain, and below that it's all work, a mixed work. We cut that knot when Pete retired and the bank said we want to reinvest in Ideal, and the new Ideal that was already in 2020 to 21. Pete left 2021, and then Daniel van Delft was appointed as CEO. So the banks, sorry, so we don't want that combination anymore, we want to split because we have plans with Ideal, which will become more operational with central functions and better checkout, called Ideal 2.0, we can't say that, I think it's the new Ideal, with a lot of European ambitions. So, and they've also moved out as of the August 1st last, they moved out to another place. And that had been cooking in the background, of course, a long time, since the Dutch banks were not, ING was, but not for the Dutch market, member of the European Payments Initiative. And that was, I think, a strategic move from the Dutch bank to say, okay, we're European Payments Initiative, if you want to get us aboard, we have some goodies that we would like to give you in exchange for some shares, or something like that. And basically that was conflicting with the basic assumptions underlying the European Payments Initiative, because they said in the beginning, we have seen so many European initiatives go sour because everybody believes their solution, their local solution should be the European solution. Just as we said, Ideal is the best there is, so if everybody takes Ideal, we have a European solution. And the Spanish said, oh, if everybody takes Bizum, we have a European solution, and so on and so forth. So the senior bank said that's this bottom-up approach, trying to scale up one local solution is a dead-end street. We've tried it many times before, it won't work. So this time around, we will do it differently. We will get a band of brothers together who are prepared to kill all their darlings and start from scratch. Which was the starting point, of course. That didn't work either. And then they had a more nuanced view. It's what I've been hearing. I don't know, of course, this is my perspective. Maybe we shouldn't be too fundamentalistic on that principle, kill your darlings, everything needs to be built from scratch. Maybe in some circumstances we could have a more pragmatic view on our principles, and that is why they decided, of course, Ideal is the superior solution in Europe, also in terms of the numbers. So wouldn't it be logical, and I think the board of EPI agreed, guys, we can hold to this principle forever, but if that kills us, the principle, that's not very wise either. So that led to a deal, but it's a complicated deal. because it's not like that Europe is going to roll out IDU. It's sort of the other way around. There will still be sort of a European ideal built because the Dutch ideal doesn't think it will need to come together. So for the coming years, nothing is going to change in the Dutch market.
No, it's quite likely, I think, as well, that other exchanges like with Ideal are going to happen as well, like with B2, for example, in Spain, which is also saying that there's a superior payment solution in the European market.
And that's nothing new. We had it with direct debit in the old SEPA days. The French said they had the best direct debit. We said we had the best direct debit, and the Germans said they had the best direct debit.
Yeah. That's how it goes. Yeah.
That's Europe, right?
So thank you, guys. Let's give guys a big hand. Thanks. Thanks. So indeed, so it's nice to. So there's quite a lot going on in the payment world always, and it's always quite complex with all these different entities and all these different legislatory proposals that are floating around and potentially having an impact. But definitely, the Payment Association is the place to check it out. Briefly about Holland Fintech for the ones who are new about that. You can also argue that we're not really a trade association because we actually work with so many different parties that it's pretty hard to actually come up with legislative proposals or ideas or do lobby. So we're much more like a marketplace where we actually bring together incumbent players, upcoming startups, investors, advisors, and the whole entourage and infrastructure around it. Because we think actually that the way financial products are being created is just becoming much more complex, so we need to facilitate somehow all these actors that are now creating these services to come together, understand what the potential is to collaborate, what the frameworks around that are, because the legislations are also changing, and how to collaborate on it. So that's what we're trying to do, hence the Connect, Learn and Innovate as our motto, to drive everyone, bring everyone together. And on that knowledge part, we always try to give you some insights about the things that are going on in the market. So I'll do a brief overview of some of the things that happened here in the world of fintech in the month of July. The meetup is a bit on the late end this time. Normally it's about the second Thursday of the month. This time we moved it because of the summer holidays towards the end of the month. So the news is slightly older than you might be used to, but gives you a bit of an idea. Generally, I think it's we see that the inflation is still relatively on a high level. Because of that, the central banks are still increasing the rates, and so did they actually do that in the previous month. They announced that on just in the 2nd of August, actually the rate would raise to 4.25, the refinance rate. And so we see that actually is quite important because it actually does a lot for business models of banks, for example neobanks, but also plays a role, for example, if you talk about the way people can access finance, right? So we see actually the lending rates going down and SME having a harder time actually getting access to funding. But in some cases, actually for some of the alternative finance players, it's an advantage now because they have been financed before and they don't feel this raise that much themselves directly. And so if they still have money on the balance sheet with a lower cost, they are able to lend to a lower cost now. That gives them a bit of a positive advantage. So on the Capital Markets Union, there's some work being done. I think especially in June there was a lot of legislative proposals, just like the digital euro, instant payments and everything that Gijs was mentioning before. Now there was more like a call to actually look at market data transparency, so more focused on the capital markets. There's quite some work step by step being done to actually create this Capital Markets Union, where I think a lot of parties are hoping to actually see a much more unified Europe, because currently still it's very much behind on, for example, capital markets in the US, which are actually much more liquid and much more transparent as it is. We see that some of we have of course seen over the past years that there's a lot of troubles with banks sometimes to fulfill their criteria for AML. A lot of fines have been issued, but we actually also see the same thing in the fintech world. There was quite some trouble with the Railsar, for example, the reverse Rails Bank, but also we see that, for example, N26, a neobank from Berlin, is still under very tight controls by the BaFin, because the BaFin says that their AML controls are not in order just yet, which actually means that they have a stop on a certain amount of clients that they can onboard every month. So there's a really big impact for their whole growth perspective. Also on the crypto side, things are not that rosy yet, even though there was a lot of speculation about the crypto ETFs going live. That's actually the news from August. here on Euronext. But what we saw especially in July was that the Department of Justice in the US was after Binance, for example, as one of the major crypto platforms for, amongst others, again, money laundering and other lack of controls. And Binance responded to that they were very likely to actually do a very large layoff rounds because of that. It was big in the news. So we see that the crypto world is not yet in the positive side there. Interesting one is, of course, we've seen that over the past years that China sort of closed down. They've been really sort of beating down their own tech giants, as well as closing the borders to external influences and external capital. Now they actually started opening up to Visa and MasterCard to a certain extent. So it's interesting to see that they're trying to experiment now again with reaching out again to more international players to becoming more active. Curious to see what will happen there. Payhawk, fintech unicorn, also one of our members, launched in Lithuania. Was nice to see. They keep on expanding. We have a UK bank, the Bank of London, applying for a EU banking license. Of course, after the Brexit, we still see that there's a lot of UK-based banks have to apply for European banking license separately. So this is in the wake of that. Revolut is also a bit under quite some scrutiny, just like N26. It's the UK-based neobank. But they were actually able, they see it because of a fraud, there was quite some money, 20 million being stolen, quite some challenge. On that note, there was also an interesting news actually recently from the Bank of Ireland, where they actually had a glitch in their systems and consumers could actually tap money from the ATMs even though there was no money in their accounts. That went viral on social media quite fast, so the ATMs were very busy, you can imagine. Interesting one, India made really big steps in their payment infrastructure with UPI as a core infrastructure that provides everyone with payment possibilities. And of course the interesting thing is how could you actually connect to that internationally. And we've seen that Singapore was one of the ones to actually connect to that first, but France, after a visit of their president recently to India, is also actually making court there to apply for connection to the UPI system and connect a lot of Indians for international payments. Quite interesting. Some acquisitions in the RegTech space by Correlytics acquiring CloseMatch, quite interesting. IMC, one of the option market makers based out of Amsterdam, acquired Atlas Technologies. Visma, a large conglomerate of all kinds of whatever you can know in finance, they probably do it. They acquired a digital signature player to actually further enhance their offering. And Molly partnered with Klaviyo to actually look at more marketing automation and integrating payments in the whole marketing automation flow, which I think is also quite interesting if you talk about the whole growth hacking space. Quite nice to see that those companies can collaborate across these different boundaries. So these are some of the highlights. I hope to give you a bit of an insight on what's going on. If you want to read out on these news instantly, every Friday we send out a newsletter with global fintech developments where you can catch up on all these developments. We also track funding there. Here you see the largest rounds from July. So 345 million for TP24, big lending platform. Claire was actually second with 175 million raised, and Netcraft raised 100 million. They're slightly on the lower side of the spectrum. Normally you would always expect some that are above 400, 500 million. But I guess it's summertime, and we've seen already, of course, that throughout the year the funding has been a bit lower. And in July, a bank also announced that they actually completed another part of their round in the whole process. They've been in the news quite a lot, as they also recently again won another court case, or actually the secondary part of the court case against the Dutch Central Bank for the way they do their oversight on AML. So there's been a big court case that was won already, I think in fall last year, where they said, okay, we want to use AI to actually fight money laundering. And the Dutch Central Bank said, no, you have to use old-fashioned methods according to our checklist. And they didn't want to do that, so there was a big court case about that, and they actually won that. And it's especially quite extraordinary, since normally banks don't want to publicly fight the central bank because you try to keep that relationship well, because there's a lot of ways that the central bank can make your life difficult. So it was quite brave, and actually so recently they got that the actual fine that they got from the Dutch central bank has been reduced to a really, really small amount. Well, several million still, but much lower than it was initially. Well, here we can see how funding went over the past until, of course in July we get all the reports up until the second quarter. This one is from CB Insights, where you can see that in Q2 the funding went down quite a bit, although we should realize that there was a 6.5 billion in the first quarter by Stripe, and so if you deduct that, it actually was a relatively flatliner between Q1 and Q2. It looks very dramatic, but we should realize that 21 was really a bit of a funny period where inflation was especially visible in the valuation of companies as well as the amounts that were being spent on fintech. We see things normalize a bit, and so we expect actually this line to continue on a much normal level here after a while. Yeah, and then the last part, so one of the things we also do in the newsletter is actually highlight some of the research reports that came out, and here you can see some interesting ones on how Europeans are actually using buy now, pay later. Quite interesting, I think, to see how that differs over the different countries. But you can see now that it's becoming quite popular, and this is also why the European Union has decided to come up with new regulation, because in a lot of countries, actually most of these loans were not registered. So even though a lot of countries have a central credit registry, buy now, pay later did not count as credit. So a lot of people could actually go into pretty large debts without them being noticed by, for example, instances that were fighting over debtness with people. That's now being changed, which could actually mean a lot for different parties like Klarna, for example, that are very heavily reliant on these kind of products. I'll leave it at that. I hope that was clear. Did I forget anything? Any news? Any questions? No? Then I think we should just go to our first speaker from Airwallex. Come on up. Let's
Can you guys all hear me? Okay. Really nice to be here. This is my first event, and I think Airwallex's first event. So I'm going to take you guys through what we do from a partnership perspective. It's a really commercial-focused presentation. I can tell you guys a little bit of our secret sauce, but I'm going to keep this very high level. So I head up our strategic partnerships team for EMEA, and I'm going to have to explain to you a little bit about what we do as a business in order for you to understand how we partnered to make a success. And so I'll kind of just give you a very brief overview of what we do as a business, but we have a mission to build the best financial infrastructure to allow businesses to scale globally. And what we mean by that is we basically have rebuilt, our CEO says we have rebuilt the SWIFT network, and in a lot of ways we have made doing borderless business easier for our customers. Just a snapshot, because if you guys were at Money 2020 this year, you would have seen our ridiculously big stand as you walked in. But in case you weren't, this is just a little bit about who we are. We started in 2014 in Melbourne in Australia, and actually the founder story is that Jack, our founder, and his co-founders started a coffee shop in Melbourne, and they were trying to import coffee lids from China. And they were paying between 7 and 8% for the FX fees, the bank account opening, and they basically said there has to be a better way for us to do this cross-border trade as an SME. And so Airwallex was born out of the need to kind of simplify the cross-border and global business structures. And so we're currently valued at 5.5 billion. We've done, I think, 3 Series E extensions. And we have about 1,400 employees, but that's growing rapidly. You can see the rest. There's some decently sized names there. Yes, just to give you some sense that we are a credible business and we have done some good stuff. But what I really want to focus on is how we partnered to get there. Because I think it's quite interesting when you think about the construct of what businesses normally do, where they go through like a buy, build, partner evaluation. And normally it's like in absolute terms. They either buy, they either partner, or they either build. And I'm going to speak about this in terms of the trends that we've seen and then how we've kind of reacted to that. So the first big trend is why we have a business, right? it's like SMEs find it really hard to be able to grow a global business and keep their costs. And so if you were to rebuild the financial infrastructure globally, and you wanted to do it from the ground up, and you wanted to build a bank in every market and get licensed, and it would take you like 30, 40 years, and we all know that that's like got a lot of deep moats and a lot of things that you just can't do as a startup. And so our entire business is actually built on what we call financial partnerships, but they're really strategic partnerships to help us grow. And so we have basically a couple of banking partners around the world, and those banking partners basically underpin our entire financial infrastructure, and we were able to then build a platform on top of that that's completely abstracted. So 8 years ago, if you were a business and you wanted a bank account in, I don't know, let's say 5 different currencies in 10 different markets, you might have to go and open up 10 different bank accounts with 3 different banks. We basically built that out, and then customers can come to us and they can basically open up a single bank account, and we can spin up all the currency accounts and move money in between them without them needing to worry about all of the complexity that goes on behind that. And the really interesting thing is we've kind of dropped the stack down, and we're able to take that stack, and other fintechs are able to build that banking platform themselves. And so if it wasn't for us being like very partner focused, we really wouldn't have been able to build this in the speed that we built it. So as we built this thing out and we started talking to different businesses, we found the next really big trend was that it's just really hard as an SME to kind of do cross-border e-commerce. I don't know how much you guys know about payment acquiring, but basically the first big problem is if you're a European merchant, and you want to sell into pounds, you first have to pay international acquiring fees. Second thing you have to do is you have to acquire into pounds, and then, you have to acquire into euros, and then they force the conversion. So you're paying like 3 to 4% extra in fees. So what we've been able to do is we've partnered with, the first problem we can solve, we were able to open up multi-currency accounts that you can do like-for-like settlement in. But we can't necessarily allow merchants to use us as a merchant of record, and that's not something that we wanted to build. So we partnered with this company called Open Border, who is essentially a merchant of record. And traditionally what would have happened is we would have looked at Open Border, we would have said they're a competitor of ours, they're going to take our customers and they're going to take their acquiring revenue. And instead of doing that, we looked at them and we said, how do our capabilities combine? And we've essentially built a partnership where we can take an SME, we can offer them a multi-currency account, and Open Border can acquire for them locally, so to drop all the fees, and then put their money into the multi-currency account, and then they can move the money back to whichever currency they want for a lower fee. So you can see that where we traditionally saw these businesses as competitors, we're now starting to partner with them to expand our capabilities. The Amazon one's also super interesting. We have a really big APAC business, and a lot of our customers are actually in China. And a lot of these Chinese sellers sell on Amazon. But what Amazon was doing, and a lot of the marketplaces do, is they basically take those pools of funds that they owe the sellers and they leave them in the currency of the marketplace. So you're a Chinese seller, you sell on Amazon, and Amazon will pay you out in USD. And you can imagine what has to happen. The Chinese seller has to open up a USD bank account. They have to try and get the US bank to trust them in the first place, and it's a real pain. And so what we did is we essentially allowed the Chinese sellers to open up an Airwallex account in China, and then opened up a USD account with them in the US. Then we got Amazon to trust us as a US bank account. And so the whole trust ecosystem is then solved. And then the Chinese seller is able to accept the USD in the US and then move it back or spend it in the US as much as they want. And so, again, we used our capabilities and looked at these pools of funds that were sitting around the world and kind of partnered with these companies to do this money movement. And I think the last one is not really a trend that we haven't seen before, but it's a trend that we don't think we've actually solved. And so there's a lot of incumbents out there that have got a lot of businesses that want to make payments out of their platforms. But we haven't really seen any of them do it in a really good way. And so we've partnered with companies like NetSuite, Approval Max, and Asperato to try and figure out how we can invoice, bill pay, and even issue cards out of their platforms in a better way that they're doing it right now. And I know you guys have seen these kinds of trends before, but the interesting thing about them is that we don't think that they're properly solved yet, and we're still seeing huge growth as we continue to solve these different problems. 8 to 10 minutes was not enough for me to go really deep on any of these things. So if you guys catch me afterwards or find me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to talk to you guys more. And if anyone's interested to hear more about Airwallex, yeah, come and find me. Thanks.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Good luck. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Don and the wider team for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I'm very conscious I'm the last man standing between you and a beer. So, and I've been in that fight before, so I don't want to go there. So I'll keep it short and sharp. It's very difficult to, I think, abbreviate or sum up what Compass Plus does in 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes when we've been on the market for over 3 decades. So it's a long time. It's a long time to be out there to make mistakes. It's a long time to gather some very, very useful information. But with over 400 financial institutions, PSPs, fintechs, etc. using our technology today, I think it's fair and square that we're doing something absolutely right. I won't go through all these facts, but I'll let you peruse them as we go along. But I think the point to focus on is the 30 years in the business. Now, everything that underpins Compass Plus and core to our business is a third-generation payments platform called Transaxis. Now, Transaxis is extremely unique. It was built fundamentally with the future and with the future and innovation in mind, and at the very essence of its DNA. So that said, again, it's not like any other payments platform that you'll find on the market today. Fact is also that we don't think in the worlds of cards. We think in tokens. It's not API ready. It's API first. It's not cloud enabled. It's cloud native, and it always was. So, and this came about 12 years ago. So we were at the forefront then, and today we have a payments platform used widely, but more importantly, that's fit for purpose in a very dynamic, changing environment as we find ourselves in the payment landscape today. What do customers use us for? If you don't know us, then Transaxis basically underpins either on-premise or indeed via SaaS or as a PaaS solution via any two of our global processing centres internationally. It underpins basically card issuing, cradle to grave in that environment. It also supports or underpins the acquiring for many acquirers today, and ATM processing, ATM management, and all digital solutions in that area, including BNPL, which we'll look at a case study in a few minutes. So having said that, I mean 400 plus FIs, PSPs, fintechs can't invariably be wrong, but fundamentally we believe we have a nugget of gold here that is sustained by our users. Also, what's very important is, again, at the creation of this solution going back a few years, we wanted to enable the customers to be in control, and that is to make them agnostic from us. And that is that they themselves, within their R&D teams, etc., can actually take control and develop this solution and take it forward. Classic example is Klarna, just one example of many, I might say, who 12, 13 years ago took Transaxis and created what was then financing, invoicing, etc. Today known as Buy Now, Pay Later, and it's become the giant that it is. But it did that autonomously from us as a vendor. We helped them, taught them, and they went on and did their own thing. Today, I haven't got a clue what they do. We don't know what they do. We'd love to get our hands on it. Suffice to say, we do have a Buy Now, Pay Later portfolio ourselves, but very proud of the fact that Klarna achieved what it did achieve on the base of our product. So I hope that fundamentally just gives you a little brief taste of what we're about and what we can do. From a processing perspective, as I say, 2 global processing centres covering the world, and again, we provide our clients with issuing processing, ATM management processing, and acquiring processing. And that's physical cards, virtual card, plastic, and Okay, so any questions to this particular slide? I think you'll agree some nice statements there. Our first customer is still with us, going on near 30 years plus. I don't think there's too many vendors that could possibly say that. And we've never lost a client to a competitor or a migration to a competitor. In fact, to the contrary, we've done many migrations from competitors, switch competitors out there onto our platform. Just looking at two instances here, Klarna, excuse my voice, Klarna in particular, I'll focus on that because, again, the objective, thank you very much, thank you. Is that vodka? Thank you. Been a long day. So, yeah, Klarna, I think, as I say, the paramount for them was that they wanted to bring something in-house. First and foremost, that they could go to market within 6 months. Secondly, that they could continue the R&D of that solution, taking it forward, and it became their own, and that they owned it inherently without us in any proprietary way. And the time to market, speed to market from coming in and going to market itself, and then eventually dominating the world, which one could argue they pretty much well do in BNPL. And we achieved all of those, as you can see there. It's completely self-sufficient, and they should have launched now into Asia Pac. And more recently, Moneybase, just again, a card issuing program based in Malta. They had some specific dynamics that they wanted to achieve, and particularly was their go-to-market, short time of go-to-market. And we've got numerous success stories here where we've enabled companies to go to market. Even during COVID, we did many projects during the COVID period remotely with our clients and kept them on track with regards to their strategic missions. So if there's any questions about that, then I'm bang on 5 minutes, but I rehearsed that, then I think that surmises it. I'm here this evening, or this afternoon. Any questions, happy to take them directly. But what I want to get out of today, more importantly, is that we believe, working with our colleagues here at Airwallex, similarly through yourselves, through the Holland Fintech group, reaching out to you. We're here to assist, here to help. Not all our solutions are applicable to yourselves, but if you're thinking of issuing or processing on behalf of your clients or for yourselves for something that you're going to deliver to your clients, then we are here to assist and help. So feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thanks. Always nice to get some cases. I think that always helps to clarify your proposition quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions here in the room? Yeah. Go ahead.
What's your primary driver of revenue? License fees, fees per transactions, or percentages of transactions?
That's a very, very good question. Often a very secret question amongst vendors, as I know you'll appreciate, hence possibly the question. But at the moment, I would say it's roughly 50-50 at the moment, or maybe slightly more towards license fee, because our processing services have just been substantially upgraded with a £3 million investment in the UK. We have a lot more Asia Pac FIs now processing through the UK out of desire because of political situations in the world today. So we can see more of a push through the UK processing centre and substantial investment going there. But I would say possibly 60-40.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. Everyone clear? But especially, so what kind of case are you especially now looking for? What kind of cases do you see now as sort of a main, let's say, target groups which are sort of in flux that are interesting for you to talk to?
I mean, there are a couple of buzzwords at the moment, which from a vendor, from a switching vendor, which is a next generation switching vendor. I think there's AI, there's embedded finance, there's open banking. Those are just three main topics which are flying around, and I think dumbing down to some extent some of the real meat and the infrastructure stuff which goes on below the surface. But despite these topics leading, and some of them were mentioned from the Dutch Banking Association, beyond all that, a transaction still needs to be processed in some way, shape or form, or indeed switched in some way, shape or form. So I think just remaining agile and be able to adapt and move with those new nuances as they come towards us is basically staying ahead of the game. Transactions enables us to do that. So I think we're ready for the next curveball at any time, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. Clear? Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. Let's give all the
Thank you. Cheers.
Yes, please let us know indeed what you thought about Paul's presentation. So we we always hand out a small reward for the ones who perform best, just to make it a bit nice for everyone to do their best out here. So I hope you appreciate that. Why are the orders coming in? Hope you're all getting in. Then we're almost ready to wrap it up. I see some people are already itching to go downstairs, but or have to go somewhere else. But I hope we can all gather you later on for some drinks downstairs, where you could also, of course, meet our speakers. I think the rating was done. Yeah, it's the same. Please also give us some feedback in the same link, right? That's the same one, right? Why? Is there another QR code?
It's the QR code. The next.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Our upcoming events. Just wanted to let you know. Already mentioned Amsterdam Fintech Week coming up 12th to 15th of September. And the next meetup, so actually on the 15th of September we have the Meetup XL, which is in the part of the Amsterdam Fintech Week. And so the next one after that will be in October again, where we're going to focus on crypto, blockchain and the token economy. So looking forward to, in any case, to see you on those open events, and we have some more events for our members in between. If you're interested in that, just check out our website or let us know more. Let us know if you want to know more. Yes, then my colleague just told me who did best. Then where's Christo?
He needed to leave.
He had to leave.
Yeah.
With yours colleague, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give it to you. Christo actually got the best score, so thank you for your score. Yeah, hopefully we can connect to you in any case during the
I will be
drinks.
here.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have any questions for Christo or a colleague, then his colleague, then please
Reach out to.
meet here during the drinks. We're going downstairs for that, so we have to go down the stairs. Right down here, you'll find the drinks. So looking forward to see you all there. Another slide? Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh, that's a good one indeed. So you can get a discount on your ticket for Amsterdam Fintech Week if you want. If you again scan the QR code. We always try to make a game of how many QR codes you can scan during one session. But this is a good one. So if you want, in any case, good to grab your discount. I look forward to see you there. The program is coming up, shaping up very, very nicely. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Did I forget anything? Why? Okay? Are we good? Yeah? Are we good? Alright. Then I'll leave this one on. I want to thank you all for your attention, your questions, your participation. Looking forward to see you again next time. If you have any ideas or feedback, please let us know. We're always keen to learn how to do better. I look forward to talking to you during drinks. See you later.